Hi, I'm Dominic Muzzi, and I'm a third-year doctoral student here at the Jacob School of Music. I'm completing my coursework this year in the studio of Professor Roberto Plano. I've been playing the piano for 23 years, so I have a few tricks that I'd like to share with you today, specifically 5 techniques having to do with movement of the wrist for flexibility and freedom, 2 types of legato, tone production, and exercises for economy of motion. I've been really lucky throughout the years to have some amazing teachers who have handed down to me these strategies, and I personally use them to improve my own technique as well as share them with my students. My first technique has to do with lateral motion, lateral wrist motion specifically. I'm going to be covering a few kinds of ways in which I think the wrist should be available to move in this presentation. And the first has to do with left to right rotation, or the availability to move from left to right. This theory is based on the simple fact that all of our fingers are not the same length. Therefore, some compensation has to happen for our shorter fingers in order to retain ideal engagement of arm weight. The other added benefit of this positioning is that it's healthier for your tendons by maintaining alignment in the arm. Particularly along the outer edge of the forearm, your tendons interact with the carpal tunnel in a less friction-y way while they flex to play the keys. For instance, notice the pink line on the rightmost picture demonstrating that the thumb will often come off the keyboard in order for the outer edge of the hand to retain its ideal angle of engagement with the keys, with the straight line being formed by the wrist and the forearm. I've taken pictures of the engagement of each finger in my right hand in the following slides. Finger 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And if I go back and forth with these fast enough, it almost looks like a video. So you can watch the wrist moving from left to right in order for the hands to engage at an optimal angle with the keyboard. I do have videos, but those come later. Do you see how the pink line is moving in relation to the red line? I'd like to point out that this isn't just a wrist and forearm technique, which I'm going to show in the next few slides. There's a notion passed down from both Chopin and Liszt that says the finger is as long as the arm. Liszt is quoted as telling one of his students that one should feel that the fingers are moving from the shoulder. I think Shebuk, the famous pedagogue who taught here at IU, I think he repeated this in a masterclass that I watched. So I'd like to show the next few slides. These pictures show a little bit more of the forearm. So try to remember this phrase when you're explaining this concept to your students. And that phrase is air under the armpit. This allows for freedom from the shoulder downward. And it's helped my students in the past with allowing their arms to hang freely from their body without constriction. I also use the phrase, especially with my younger students, flap your wings. My embedding function didn't work here. So I'm gonna have to drag these videos in from my other monitor. So let's see if this works. Notice how the wrist moves to engage each finger. I think I've hammered this concept enough, so we're gonna move on, but let's watch it one more time. The next concept has to do with the vertical motion of the wrist, particularly in upwards and downward circle that I call smiles and rainbows. This exact terminology was handed down to me as an undergraduate student by my dear mentor and the brilliant pedagogue, Dr. Reed Gainsford of the Florida State University. The basic concept is that left to right motion in the wrist is not strictly flat. So this is building on our first concept. The combination of these 2 types of motions forms a circle, which is a very useful motion for economical and relaxed movement at the piano. I have some videos to demonstrate this concept, which is probably a little bit easier to see in the wrist than it is for me to explain it out loud. But basically the concept first video comes from the side angle, obviously. Let's watch it again. Notice that the sequence of events is rotation down and under, rotation up and over, rotation down and under. This can be abbreviated, so to speak, as smile, rainbow, smile. There's no hard and fast rule about which way you have to go with the wrist. It's all about what's most comfortable in your hand. Remember that every pianist has a different hand, and there really aren't any strict rules on how to play the piano. For this particular 5-finger pattern, I found it descending to work best as an under motion or a smile motion, and ascending in pitch to work as a rainbow. I'm going to play it again, and then I'm going to show it from another angle. The next angle is more from the back of the wrist. So notice, of course, that if you put your smile and your rainbow together, you form a circle. I'm noticing now that I errantly filmed a lot of these videos vertically, but the point stands. Notice how this incorporates left to right wrist motion as well, and that the rotation enhances the alignment of the arm. This allows for basically a more even distribution of weight, as well as a more balanced feeling when you interact with the key. Our next category is tone color. I want to talk a little bit about how I think about tone production, as well as how it factors into the execution of what we call legato. I know this is like the biggest tossed around and abused word in piano teaching, but it's inevitable that we would get here eventually. The simplest way I've conveyed the difference between a projecting and non-projecting tone can be broken down into the use of a fairly crude tool, which is the number 2 pencil with eraser. I don't think the grade of lead will make a difference in tone color, but I haven't really run a study. Some of the other adages that you can use are the notion of the velvet covered steel finger or the bottomless key. All of this basically means the same thing, but actually using a pencil, as I will demonstrate in the following video, allows the student to feel the follow through from the arm because their fist is clenched. So they're not really focusing on collapsing joints or knuckle placement or what have you. You can see that if you allow the arm to fall freely, the amount of sound you can produce is really quite substantial. Never struggle with projection again. Guaranteed. Just put pencils in your students' hands so they can feel this sensation. Sometimes in order to explain a difficult concept, we have to go simple. This segues into my next topic, which is finger legato versus pedal legato. Fundamentally, pedal legato has to do with the non-connective physical matching of tone, based in the theory that the piano is a percussive instrument. And the undisputable truth is that we cannot affect tone after the key and hammer have been depressed and fired. So legato essentially depends on the careful use of the pedal. One amazing pianist who espouses this theory, and I've had a few lessons with, is John Nakamatsu from San Francisco Conservatory. I've attached a video demonstrating this, but one of the benefits of this school of legato technique is that it allows the hand to relax into a natural shape in between notes, which is good for those students or professionals with smaller hands. I'll show you a video of myself playing a short melody from a Chopin nocturne with just the pencil and the pedal. As you can see, there's no need for a physical connection. The musical line is there, and if you're listening carefully and using the pedal appropriately, physical connection is not necessary in this school of legato. The opposing school is the focusing of motion in between fingers. The idea that you could choreograph the dance that a hand needs to take and the arm needs to take to form a melody, irrespective of the surface that the fingers are actually interacting with. One way of demonstrating this is the usage of the fall board, which I have a video for after this slide. I did this in lessons with both amazing Russian pianist and teachers, Boris Slutsky and Natalia Antonova. So first on the fall board, and the exact same motion in the keyboard. You see how the hand moves in between the notes. Each interval is anticipated in the finger, and the feeling of control is very finger-centric. Watch again. The next and final segment of the presentation is based on economy of motion. The exercise I have is very simple and suitable for children who might find the athletic nature of the motion to be entertaining. It also provides a lasting bodily blueprint for how to recycle motion when playing repeated notes. Essentially, one drops the hand on an open fifth like C and G using 1 and 5 and springs the hand upward with the inner 3 fingers, 2, 3, and 4, on D, E, and F respectively, looking something like this in stop motion. But of course, I have a video. I learned this technique from the late Dr. Karen Shaw, with whom I completed my master's degree, and she swore by this for learning the economy of motion, and I've virtually given it to every student that I've taught. Here's a video of the most simple form. Oh, it's not there. Again. So watch how the arm drops on the open 1 and 5 and how it springs upwards on 2, 3, and 4. You should insist that your students feel this gravity when dropping the wrist, and that the spring upwards should naturally force the wrist to spring up. I feel like I'm repeating myself. But the point is follow through. There's follow through in either direction. Of course, this exercise is tiered in difficulty and can be applied to more advanced concepts like ricochet, the concept of playing multiple notes in the same gesture. This particular exercise is extremely useful in the coda of the Chopin's Second Ballade, by the way. So let's watch the video first, and then I'll do a little bit of explaining. Notice how the single gesture of the rising and falling is able to capture these repeated notes. Please be careful to remember that this works better on pianos with the double escapement action, which is absent from most upright instruments. Grand pianos will always repeat keys easier than uprights due to the setup of their action. You can see how the wrist starts to form its own circle, and that you can catch multiple notes in the same gesture. This is one of the secrets to relaxed repeated notes, is that recycling of gesture, that allowing of the wrist to breathe while playing a repeated note instead of just playing them all down, for instance. We'll watch it one last time. We'll move on to the final trick. Okay. The final trick has to do with playing the notes of a chord together. This is an easy and practical technique that you can do for any chord that scares you, like the opening of Beethoven Fourth Concerto or Beethoven 81A, anything where you have to have the notes coming down at the same time. This is a trick that I use to practice that. Basically, you just feel the key rising and falling under your fingers all at once. You observe that body awareness of how the action is responding to your hands, and then you just freeze the hand in place like a stamp, and you send it to the bottom of the key. Let me pull up that exercise. So you notice how under my fingers, I'm measuring the way that each key is connecting to my fingertip. I'm not only feeling how much pressure it takes to put the key down, but also how it's coming up under my fingers. And that kind of two-way awareness allows me to create the kind of stamp that is going to code a little trick into my hand in order to play the notes together. Here ends my 15 or so minute talk on how to play the piano more good. I really believe in every single method that I've laid out. So I hope you can use it on yourself or your students and experience the same success that I have. Obviously, if you want to ask any further questions about this, you can hit me up on social media. I don't have like a secretary or anything. I hope you found this informative. I want to give a huge thank you to Liz Yao for including me on this project. I'm always excited at the prospect of helping people become slightly better pianists and musicians. And I'm very fortunate to have some outlets for that energy. So thank you for listening, and I will see you all eventually.